How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video. My name is Ethan Lowry. I'm a wedding and commercial photographer based here in Auckland, New Zealand. Today I'm just going to unpack some of my thoughts, experiences, feelings after 12 months of shooting almost exclusively on the GFX100 Mark II. So at this point I've shot about 30 weddings on it, 15 or so commercial gigs, a few corporate events, and of course some of my own personal work. I've clocked about 85,000 images on the body, hours and hours and hours of video. So it felt like a good time for me to check in and give some updated thoughts, because the last time I talked about the GFX was my first impressions video, almost exactly a year ago. I shot my very first wedding on the body, I think this week, 12 months ago. If this is the kind of content that you're into, please consider subscribing. Helps the channel quite a lot. I'm trying to go this thing pretty quickly, and it's going pretty well, so I'm pretty stoked with that. I'll be cranking out about a video a week for the next couple months, and then slowing down a little bit as we head back into wedding season, but my intent is to continue this year. Last wedding season got the best of me, unfortunately. Now, before I talk about the camera, let's get some disclosures out of the way. Some of you may already know, I've had a working relationship with Fujifilm New Zealand for the last year or so. And as a part of that scope of work, I was paid with a bit of gear, including my GF55mm 1.7, which we'll talk about pretty soon. However, I purchased my GFX100 Mark II with my own money after selling my Sony kit, and this working relationship has no bearing on my thoughts in this video. That said, there is bias here. I've invested a good chunk of my own cash into the system, so there's absolutely some confirmation bias here. That can't be avoided. I do like to think I'm pretty objective about things, even if I'm excited and passionate about this stuff. So all the thoughts here are my own. Fujifilm doesn't get to see this video before I release it. They don't even know I'm making it, and let's be honest, they won't watch it. Yeah, with that said, let's crack in. So as I said, I have the GFX100 Mark II and the 55mm f1.7. I used this combo exclusively for the first 6 months before I added a second lens, the 45-100mm f4. And then I recently purchased the vertical grip. Almost all of my portrait work is in portrait orientation, as you might see from my work that I'm showing here, there, everywhere, before this, after this. And it was just getting a bit annoying holding such a heavy camera in portrait orientation from the top. It's just, yeah, heavy, awkward, and felt more sure holding something from the side. So it's a pretty simple kit. The 45-100 is super utilitarian, still has quite a nice look to it. And the 55mm 1.7 is dreamy in any situation. I mean, that thing's just made to shoot wide open. If you're not shooting it wide open, you're seriously missing out. I also have an X-T5, a couple of XM5s, which I'm recording on now, and a bunch of X lenses in my bag, but we'll talk about that another time. So at a wedding, I tend to shoot literally everything on my 100 Mark II except dance floor stuff, and that's only because I don't have a lens wide enough to shoot it the way I would like to shoot it. And at that stage I pick up my X-T5 and my Viltrox 13mm 1.4 and just go to town. So I use my 55mm and my 45-100 for different parts of the day. I typically ride the 55mm for getting ready, any sort of pre-ceremony stuff, wedding party photos, portraits, and then I use the 45-100 for the ceremony, group photos, and reception. The 55mm 1.7 is my favorite lens of all time. At an effective field of view of 43mm-ish, it's perfect for how I like to work and where I want to be in relation to my subjects and the image output that I get from that. It uses Fuji's older non-LM focus motor, so it's a little bit slower, a little bit less sure, generally speaking, when it goes to focus on something, and even when it's grabbed focus and when it's trying to track. That said, I've shot a handful of ceremonies on it without any issues. Even bridegroom entrances where there's movement going back and forth, it's fine, it's just less sure. So you sacrifice a little bit of uncertainty here. It's just a matter of deciding how much certainty you feel you want to get the images you need. So the 45-100, on the other hand, is an absolute workhorse. Super functional, makes shooting the 100 Mark II feel like any other mirrorless camera. So I got this lens for an absolute steal secondhand for a commercial gig where I knew I needed a little bit more reach and could use the extra width as well, and aperture wasn't as much of a concern, but it quickly made itself a staple in my wedding kit too. It's at least as quick feeling as my X-T5 is in terms of autofocus and general usability. So it's not as snappy and sticky as some of the latest and fastest autofocus systems out there, but it's certainly fast enough for anything I do at a wedding. The LM focus mode is quick and silent, and I really wish my 55mm had them, but maybe there's a V2 coming out in a few years time and I'll immediately swap for that, because it's absolutely worth it to have that that extra bit of kind of fluidity in focus and that sureness when it does achieve focus. The lens being an f4, you'd think you were in for a boring bokeh-less image, but just because you're shooting on a larger sensor, it does have quite a nice look to it. I shoot everything in continuous autofocus using the wide tracking mode, and I just toggle the joystick around to move my focus point to where I want it to focus, and then back button focus to acquire focus, and then let it track as long as I'm holding that button down. I don't use face autofocus a whole lot. I do have it set to a little custom button on top that I can use to toggle it off and on. I found face autofocus is amazing if it's extremely obvious what face you want it to focus on. But if there are a handful of faces in the frame or around your focus point, it gets frustrating pretty quick, as it almost never focuses on who you think it should focus on. So when there are lots of people in a space and I just want to be sure that I'll now focus on my target, I just toggle face autofocus off, I use my focus point, and it does the job perfectly. Tracking is great, especially on the 45-100. I rely on it for ceremony entrances and exits, and anytime there's lots of movement or any sort of seriously dynamic scenes, and it does a great job. I have zero complaints. I miss a few frames here or there, but I'd miss those frames no matter what camera I'm shooting on. So yeah, I'm perfectly happy with it. It does everything I need it to do. Yeah, like anything in this space, the single most important thing you can do when you get new gear is to get to know it, understand its weaknesses, understand where it excels, get to know its quirks, and work around them. That's, yeah, literally the name of the game, and that applies for any system. Video on both lenses on this body is yeah, generally pretty good. The same sort of autofocus insights apply. 45-100 is amazing. The optical image stabilization of the lens is also amazing. The 55 is really, really nice. Again, it gives you quite a look. But yeah, again, it's not as sure-footed as the 45-100. And it's a bit of a shame because it's a really, really lovely lens to film with. But sometimes it just has a bit of a jitter to it and it's not quite sure what it should be focusing on. I haven't experienced any overheating issues with the 100 II with either of the lenses with long recordings. I have used my GFX for ceremonies up to around about an hour shooting 4K, 25, 30, 50, and it records fine. If there's any issue with video on this system, it's just a matter of eating battery. So if you're going to be shooting a lot of video on this, yeah, I'd recommend probably rigging it up and popping a V mount on the back and just riding that all day, because yeah, this thing chews batteries. Disclaimer: I am using third-party batteries, so take that for what it is. So weddings are generally a pretty brutal environment to stress test gear, whether it's weather, temperature, having a camera sitting on for 9 hours, whatever it is. And the type of commercial work that I do is significantly more chill. So I've done a mix of interiors, stills work, shooting secondary to a video crew, brand and location work, and some classic corporate headshots. And across all of that, the 55 and the 45-100 have covered me for pretty much everything, but generally I'll rent an ultra wide for interiors where I know I need the extra width. So to be honest, I don't have a whole lot to report on here. The camera does its job super well. The resolution is insane. I find myself delivering like downsampled images just because I know a lot of clients don't want 100 megapixel files, which is totally fair. You can't pop that on LinkedIn or embed it in a website right away, so I tend to downscale to about 6,000 pixels wide, so 24 megapixels, but let them know that I have much higher resolution files ready when they want them, if they want them. But yeah, most of my clients aren't printing big. Everything kind of lives digital for what I do, so shooting for the resolution to be able to crop and the file flexibility, but certainly not needed at output. So a buddy of mine who's thinking about getting a GFX100 Mark II asked me a few days ago if there's one feature or one thing about the camera that I absolutely hate, just because he's trying to find any excuse to not drop the cash, or he just wants to know what he's in for, really. And to be honest, there's not really anything that disappoints me or that I found overly frustrating. I knew going into the system what the limitations would be. I've got a couple little pain points that I'll talk about here in a sec, but they're not really anyone's fault, and it's not a fault of the camera or a fault of Fujifilm engineers. It's mostly just physics. So the 100 Mark II shutter maxes out at 1/4000th of a second, or you can kick into electronic shutter to go faster, acknowledging that you'll have some of the worst rolling shutter you've ever seen if either you or your subject moves. I'm not cool with rolling shutter, so I just stick to mechanical. I don't see the point in shooting electronic if I'm gonna have some wacky warped images, which means on sunny days, shooting on the 55mm 1.7, I'm having to stop down a fair bit, generally 2.8 or 4 on particularly bright days, which is fine, but you lose that look that you get at 1.7, which is the only reason to really shoot the 55mm at all. It has quite a special look at 1.7, so why bother shooting it if you can't shoot it wide open? That's my opinion, at least. So now my main issue with the GFX system has nothing to do with the way the cameras are built or designed or anything. It's purely physics, and that comes down to dark, slow lenses. All of the zooms in the GF system are f4. Most of the other primes are 2.8, 3.5, or f4, and I think the big telephoto 500mm is an f5.6, maybe? I could be wrong, could be an f4, doesn't matter. So then you have 3 primes that are properly fast, and again, not fast like full frame, but fast for GF. So you have the 55mm 1.7, the 80mm 1.7, and the 110 f2. That's as fast as the system gets natively with autofocus. Of course, you can adapt faster lenses. There's so many third-party lenses that adapts really nicely as well. As I've already said, I love my 45-100, but I do wish it were faster, like a 2.8, even a 3.2, purely for the sake of light gathering. I shoot receptions with a flash and constant lights anyway, so maybe it's not the biggest deal, but for indoor church ceremonies where you don't have a whole lot of available light, either natural light or artificial lights overhead, the 45-100 becomes functionally unusable. So I have to revert to the 55mm 1.7, which is fine generally speaking, but again, if you sometimes just need that range, and a 43mm field of view is not going to give you that range. You have heaps of cropping power, of course, so you can totally take a photo at 55mm, crop into say 85 or 100 or whatever, and you still have plenty of resolution. And at 1.7 on this lens, like you can functionally recreate an 85mm 1.4 or 100mm f2 in terms of full frame kind of look and feel, and still have plenty of res. But I don't like to crop a whole lot unless I'm just straightening a photo. So I get my compositions the way I want them in camera. So I'd much rather have a zoom lens rather than just relying on cropping, reframing things later on. And yeah, coming back to physics, I know faster glass on a sensor this big means really big lenses. And the 45-100 f4 is already pretty chunky. It's totally an annoyance I can live with. Definitely highlights an advantage of having smaller sensors. Your lenses can be a lot smaller, gather far more light, and put that light on the sensor. So yeah, purely a physics issue. I'm pretty keen on that 110 f2. It's just a matter of how much I'd actually use it. I don't love the focal length of the 110. I've never really been an 85mm equivalent shooter, but yeah, it would be helpful for ceremonies, receptions maybe not, but certainly for ceremonies. So on one hand, I'd love to have a faster mechanical shutter to cut out some of that midday light. And on the other hand, I'd love to have brighter lenses for nighttime shooting, or when it gets darker for an indoor ceremony, whatever it may be. I feel like both of these pinch points center around the fact that the sensor is huge, and the physics at this size makes it really tricky to design and engineer for. Other than those two little annoyances, I haven't had any major issues with the camera. However, on 2 outings where I used the vertical grip for the first time, I had card writing issues. I've never had card writing issues in the 85,000-ish photos that I've taken with the GFX100 II. And the first day I took it out with the vertical grip installed, card write issue. I didn't lose any files, it just kind of locked things up for a minute. Had to pull the battery, pop the battery back in, the files were there, it was fine. That happened, I thought maybe it was a one-off. Did the same thing again next week when I tried to use it. So yeah, bit of a bug maybe. Not sure if this is related to me using third-party batteries. It very well could be. or if there's a contact point issue or something else entirely, but I'll look to get that sorted over winter before we kick into next wedding season. So we've covered what I use, how I use it, and a few pain points. I thought I'd kind of end here on like my GFX wish list, or what I'd like to see next from Fujifilm in the GFX space. I guess what opportunities they could take to take more of my money, which I would happily give them. So improved autofocus is a bit of a given. I don't really need to state the obvious, but it's worth saying. So this sort of thing is generally just generational, updated as processors and algorithms improved. But I would love a firmware update, if possible, to add a little bit of speed. But I know that's not always technically feasible. Second, a 50 megapixel version of the 100 Mark II. So as I mentioned earlier, I had the 50S Mark II, didn't love it. But I did love the resolution on it. The sensor itself was really beautiful, but the resolution was great. It was, I think, probably a sweet spot for me. If they could do the same body, same video modes, all that, just a lower resolution sensor, I'd be pretty stoked. I don't really need 100 megapixels, so I could happily cut that down, especially if it meant increasing readout speed, mitigating those jello shots using electronic shutter. I know this probably complicates things with the whole hierarchy of what the GFX lineup looks like, but if they did release a new 50 megapixel GFX camera, I imagine they'd release that alongside the 100 Mark III and issue that as the 50 Mark III. So third, I'd love an XLR input handle that interfaces with the digital hot shoe on this camera. So Tascam makes the CA XLR 2D, which I'll put on screen somewhere around here, that interfaces with the hot shoe to record internally, so no wires required. I just really love clean audio. I've got a nice little mic system here in the studio. The room's not treated, so you probably hear a little bit of echo. I'm working on that, don't worry. But yeah, I'd love to be able to take my proper mics out into the field. Yeah, so I'm hoping we get more accessories like this with the launch of the GFX Eterna later in the year. Who knows if we'll get anything for the GFX100 Mark II out of all of that. I'm hoping we kind of get some video rollout features and some other accessories that are kind of backward compatible. I'm not sure if I've talked about this next one on the channel, but I've certainly talked to Fujifilm New Zealand people about it. I would love a fast 35mm. So 35mm on a GFX sensor equates to roughly a 28mm field of view, which for me is a really, that's a great spot. 24 is probably a little bit too wide, even though I shot on 24 for years. 35 is a little bit too narrow for me. I've always really loved 28. I shot on a Leica Q2 for most of this wedding season as a second camera. Shoot alongside my GFX with the 55mm. That was a really nice combo. I would just love a native 28mm equivalent for the system. F2, f2.8, probably not any slower than that, but yeah, f2 would be the dream. And then finally, I feel like every single lens that gets released from here on should be built with LM focus motors. It makes the world of a difference comparing between the 45-100 and the 55mm. And I think if Fuji wants the GFX platform to gain momentum and be this really reliable ecosystem, they need fast, reliable autofocus lenses in the lineup, and not all of them to be f4. So that pretty much wraps it up. To summarize, 12 months in, really enjoying the system, enjoying shooting on it, loving the images out of it. A couple niggles here or there, but I think they're totally worth working through and working around. If you have any questions about shooting GFX, either the lenses I use or how I use them, whatever it may be, please drop them in the comments below. If there's quite a lot of chat down there, I'll make a whole other video addressing those questions and chatting through it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.